My doctoral thesis is entitled Once a Peasant, Always a Peasant: Socio-Ecological Resilience of Ndiaman's Food System in Senegal, West Africa. If I had to summarize my thesis in one sentence, I'd say it's research conducted with female and male, young and old, peasants in Senegal that explores their understanding of their food system and how they are building or not environmental and social resilience over time. The originality of this research is in going beyond the single analysis of climate change as a geophysical phenomenon, but truly embracing different intersectionalities and integrating indigenous situated knowledges to listen to and propose different perspectives on complex food systems. The research scope is defined by three key boundaries: a geographic boundary. The research is based in the area of the village of Ndiaman in Senegal. A temporal boundary: the Ndiaman food system is studied from the eldest living memory or the country's independence in 1960 to its current form in 2020. And an actor boundary: the analysis of Ndiaman's food system is centered on the point of view of the research team. All participants were born in the village or married into the village, and they know its dynamics intimately. Special emphasis was given to women and youth, social groups who are commonly marginalized and whose voices are seldom heard and valued. Here is a photo of key members of Group Mbogaif, among the most active participants in this research. The aims of the research are twofold: to assess and reinforce the socio-ecological resilience of Ndiaman's food system through the valorization of local knowledges, skills, and practices, and to explore the potential of participatory action research and associated mixed methods when conducting research with often marginalized female and/or young peasants. To explore Ndiaman's food system resilience, 4 research questions were chosen. Research question 1, what is the system's context? Looks at the past, locally and nationally, even globally. Research question 2, how is the system defined and organized? It looks at resources, in this case ecological, physical, financial, human, sociocultural, and spiritual resources. Research question 3, how is the Ndiaman food system acted upon? It looks at the approaches adopted right now in Ndiaman. Research question 2 and 3 help understand the system's strengths and weaknesses. Finally, research question 4, how socio-ecologically resilient is the system? Looks at the opportunities and threats at present and in the future for Ndiaman and its community. This graphical representation reflects the adaptation of the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework into a Resilient Food Systems Framework, which was the first and pivotal theoretical framework adopted in this research. Feminist political ecology meant a strong emphasis on intersectionality, and especially gender and age. Traditional ecological knowledges were also selected because true participatory action research required the acknowledgement, respect, and engagement with local knowledges. The methods chosen reflect this engagement. We used hybrid methods with no hierarchy. Archival research to understand Ndiaman's context and heritage. This included historical satellite imagery, participatory video to engage the youth and to enable recording of knowledge sharing, informal and semi-structured interviews, focus group discussions using visual methods such as drawings, and practical sessions such as cooking demonstrations, field visits led by female and male peasants, a survey to better understand the size and organization of the neighborhood, an autoethnography to reflect on my participant observation through note-taking and drawings. There are no perfect and complete methods. Each dataset has its silences and gaps. Triangulation is used here to establish a conversation between the different methods, knowledges, intersubjectivities, and partial objectivities. Data was analyzed participatively with iterative restitutions and discussions and using in vivo. For me, this is one of the strongest parts of my work, embracing complexity and a flexibility that lets the field speak. Participants felt empowered sharing what they wanted at their own pace, and this brought interesting results and discussions. So let's look at those now. I've chosen figure 148 to summarize my results. The initial assessment from the community was that they practice less farming, they are less self-sufficient, and they're now more dependent on a monetized economy. Climate change is one of the causes for this assessment. It has caused serious droughts in the region in the past decades. But there is also a double exposure to imperialism and globalization, which have promoted deforestation and the adoption of unsustainable farming practices, which with the droughts have led to mass land degradation and ultimately to less farming, less homegrown food, and the consequent dependence on money to buy food. Three main approaches are adopted. Small local entrepreneurship, which means people can earn some money while still living in the village. For example, selling livestock, which is mainly done by men. Trade with professions such as tailor, roofer, taxi driver, mainly done by men. Shopkeeping, mainly done by men, whilst women might sell door to door or at school gates, for example. Collecting and selling wood, the main cooking fuel. Collecting and selling straw to smoke fish. Straw is collected by women and often sold by children. All of these approaches, though, reinforce the cycle of the initial assessment. And the last two options greatly reinforce deforestation. A different approach adopted consists of paid local seasonal work, which again enables villagers to earn money while still living in the village, but in this case it is dependent on seasonal exogenous businesses. Men and women mainly work in farms growing out-of-season produce for the European market. Finally, the third option is economic migration. Typically men leaving the village for extended periods of time, often leaving wives and children in the village to work in the nearby fishing town Mbur or at the capital city Dakar. These approaches have multiple consequences or outcomes. All of them mean there is less farming labor available, and therefore less farmland being used. So many villagers sell their farmland to get some income, conscious that otherwise unused land can be requisitioned by the state. But these outcomes reinforce the initial assessment again. A different outcome is the increased external influences now arriving in the village, which lead to progressive loss of tradition, and villagers believe to the loss of social connection and solidarity, therefore reinforcing the decreased farming, the loss of self-sufficiency with weaker support networks, and the increased dependence on the monetized economy. In the discussion, though, I return to this image and propose a new interpretation of it. This process is indeed a vicious cycle, leading to long-term destruction with environmentally and socially unsustainable approaches. And villagers are the first ones to observe and to acknowledge this. They feel the disempowerment of peasants, the loss of tradition, and they debate extensively about the responsibility of formal education too. Yet, the community's short-term survival approaches ensure their connection to place and being. Yes, villagers are farming less, but they are still farming and they are still connected to the land, albeit relying less on their own food and more on money to purchase food. It is the connection to the land, even if only by proxy for those who have migrated, that defines the group, their identity as peasants, as Serer-Sin peasants. The future lies in faith, in time, and in life, with all their fluidity and complexity. So though the food system could arguably be considered environmentally unsustainable and not sovereign, villagers trust in their connection to the land, their identities, and the future for socio-ecological resilience. Interestingly, through an intersectional approach, young and old, women and men all understood resilience as the capacity to continue feeling Serer-Sin. And this for me is the second most interesting contribution of my work. Rather than forcing an academic prescriptive analysis to the data, the approach used lets the field speak till the discussion and conclusion, and opens a space for the interpretation of socio-ecological resilience based on the fluidity and complexity of identities. The shift of attention from climate change to food systems and socio-ecological resilience, the theoretical framework based on the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework, feminist political ecology, and traditional ecological knowledges, and the use of participatory action research and hybrid methods have meant that this research revealed perspectives on resilience that connect body and soul, everyday actions, and spirituality. It would be relevant to pursue future work in food systems and resilience research. Further exploring spirituality, the invisible and the hidden half of nature, as Julia Wright puts it in her last book. Further exploring the notion of identity and its malleability. And methodologically, it would be worth adopting and adapting the Resilient Food Systems Framework to new settings to see how it could be populated and which messages it would highlight.